The March 24th meeting of the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners board meeting to order. Dawn, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Frank Denton,
Here.
Mr. James Ainsworth, Mr. Darren Black, Mr. Milton Gutierrez, Mr. William Clock,
Here.
Mr. Thomas McDonald, Mr. Thomas Rice, Mr. David Yelovich. We have a quorum.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interrupt, I don't see anyone's video on for the people that announced that they were here.
We have a quorum in place. There are two board members that are not with us today. Mr. Gutierrez, who this week, just yesterday, I guess it was, had a new baby boy. So congratulations to him, but he's not going to be with us today. And Tommy told us when we scheduled this meeting a month ago or several weeks ago that he was not going to be able to make it, Tommy Rice. Dave Yelovich, so far as I know, will be here. We had a little bit of a late start because of some traffic issues and getting in to the office here, but we do have a quorum now. So is there a motion to excuse the absence of Mr. Rice and Mr. Gutierrez? Moved by Mr. Black.
Justin, second.
Justin seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And if one of the staff members, if you will get Dave Yelovich's status, that would be helpful to us.
Mr. Chairman, do we have 5 members present at the meeting location?
We do. They've all
Okay.
answered
For some reason,
during the roll call.
I'm not seeing videos of Mr. Black and Mr.
Yeah, well,
Yelovich.
they're sitting here with us. We got a technical issue, but they're all sitting here at the dais with me. Before I start my remarks, which are going to be really brief, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to introduce a couple of new staff members that you'll be hearing from later on in the day. So Lisa, why don't you introduce our new staff members?
My apologies. Can you hear me now? I hope.
We can.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm excited today. And to my left, whom you can, well, you can't tell my left, but she's waving now, is Lynn Latome, which is our new attorney and general counsel. And she is going to be absolutely wonderful. We're getting her up and running, and you'll see later in her presentation, she's done a lot of work to get ready for this meeting. And I can't begin to say how much more work she's got to do, but she's up to it. Let me put it that way. So Lynn, glad to have you. And over to my right, and I think we've got Kenneth on. Do we have you on camera yet? A very exciting thing. And let me back up just a moment. Richard Herman, who you're all used to seeing, who's retired from the plumbing board once, came back, our director of finance, left again, came back, and we've still got him in the wings, but Kenneth Biddle is now our director of finance, and so he's replacing Richard, and Richard's going to remain with us for a little bit. We can't let him go yet. We're needy. And so, but Kenneth, you'll get used to seeing his name, and he'll do the reports this time, and Richard's in the wings somewhere. And but Richard's excited and well-deserved some rest and vacation days. So, and then we're currently working Kenneth to death and throwing a whole bunch of stuff on him, but he's hit the ground running, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm going to tell you, this is the most excitement I've had in years. So it's a great thing. So welcome, Kenneth and Lynn.
Welcome to the both of you. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with Kenneth, and he is a real professional. He has got a lot of background, I think 13 years working for state agencies prior to coming to us in a financial position. Prior to that, he was in the Navy. Still, what ship are you on?
I was on the USS Patriot in Sasebo, Japan.
Yeah.
Mighty minesweepers.
Okay. Anyway, I have relied so heavily on Richard for the past year, and I'm really quick gaining a confidence level with Kenneth. Kenneth is a consummate professional. He's got a lot of background, a lot of knowledge, and I am really happy to see him. I'm going to miss Richard. Richard was trying to retire when I got here a year ago, and has been trying to retire every month since I've been here. But finally, we let him go temporarily. Lynn, I have known through a previous life. Lynn was in the general counsel's office at TDLR when I was chairman over there. I believe she worked at TDLR from 2009 to 2017. And I was there from 2003 to 2013. So we overlapped a little bit. Lynn, I have ultimate confidence in her work. She did a lot of things at TDLR, but also she dealt with the electrician rules. And you might remember TDLR took over the electricians. There was no such thing as statewide a license for an electrician. It was all handled by the municipalities. And Lynn took that on. So she's familiar with occupational trades and rule writing. She did the property tax advisors, which is a brand new program. We had never been licensed before. And she did a really fine job there. And I have, because of my previous knowledge and work experience with Lynn, she is going to fit us like a glove. And I would tell you both that I know you're going to make a contribution to our organization, but I hope that our agency fulfills your objectives and goals also, because we want to be very attentive that you get out of this as much as we're getting out of it. So welcome. We're glad to have you. The future has never looked brighter for the plumbing board, in my opinion. So just a couple of brief remarks before I turn it back over to Lisa for her presentation. We did, and Darren, I'll ask you to chime in here in a minute. We did have our first of a series of town hall meetings in Tyler this past month. We had 20 or 30 plumbers show up for the event, which is a little bit disappointing to me. We had set up for 100 plus plumbers to come, but it was a good turnout. The weather was absolutely horrible. It was the one time that we had ice, but I don't feel sorry for anyone for not being there, because Darren drove from Abilene all the way to Tyler, Texas through ice, and then turned around and went home that night. So I don't want anybody complaining that the weather was too bad to get out, because Darren came all the way from Abilene that afternoon and turned around and left at 8 o'clock going back home that night. So it was a good turnout. I was telling a group of people before we started, I had a hard time getting anybody to complain about anything. And we certainly invited everyone to voice their complaints. I think one of the reasons I had anticipated what the biggest problem that a lot of the plumbers that I've heard, and we addressed them during the opening remarks, and that's difficulty in getting in touch with somebody, or getting a response from an email, or unlicensed activity. So we basically covered that in advance, and those are what I am hearing anecdotally from the industry that are the problems that they're seeing. So we are addressing them. This year is going to be the year that we specifically do that. We're going to have more of these town hall meetings. And I'd ask the board and I guess specifically Ron, we'd like to have one up in the Panhandle area. And Darren and I talked a little bit, whether it be in Abilene or be in Lubbock or be Midland. What are your thoughts about that?
Well,
Lubbock is halfway between Amarillo and Midland. You've got it's probably 800,000-900,000 people between those three cities. So Lubbock is probably the most central.
Okay.
But I don't know that Abilene would be that bad either. But if you're going to get the Panhandle, it's probably going to be Lubbock.
Lubbock would. Okay. There's no particular order that we're going to take these. Before I go on, Mr. Yelovich is virtually, Dave, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here. I apologize. I can't be in that room today, but I am here virtually.
Great. So we'll let the record reflect that Dave Yelovich is joining us. He's joining us online today, and I can see his charming face sitting right there.
Thank you.
Darren, any remarks or comments? Like I say, you and Tommy Rice both came to Tyler. Any remarks or observations that you want to make about the meeting?
I would just echo everything you stated. The meeting was a success for everybody that attended.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the perception and optics of what we've created there, of making ourselves available to our industry, to our plumbers, to our community, to even the CE. We had some CE providers, and really some. I felt like the interest in the curriculum from the high school level came out in that meeting more so than the plumbers that were there. We had a few course providers that were there that really showed an interest in what that's going to resemble and look like, and that was a perfect place to have it, being that Tyler is implementing that first program. So,
and I will say this, we got a very positive feedback about the high school program.
yes,
It seems like a lot of people were really impressed with that. Gary Brown, who's heading up the Tyler Independent School District effort, said that they have had 40 people show up to participate in their first class. So I think that's a good start. We are going to need to come up with some type of number of how many high schools are going to be participating. And as we go around the state for these town hall meetings, I hope to maybe solicit or get some input from other high school programs that people are aware of, because that's going to directly tie to our legislative appropriation request, which is coming up this year. And just as an example, if Tyler Independent School District has got 40 students that are in their program, and I don't know how many school districts there are in the state of Texas, there's 254 counties. So certainly there's at least that. If 20 or 30 schools in the state of Texas, which I think is a reasonable number, adopt that program and each have 30 students involved in it, 2.5 years from now, we're going to have a huge influx of folks to test and to put into the industry, because that'll be in addition to the other means of becoming a tradesman or journeyman. So we anticipate that to really ramp up, and we're going to have to anticipate that in our legislative appropriations request coming up this year, because we have put together the infrastructure and the testing to do it. Board members, where would you suggest that we do our next town hall meeting? I have no preference. Should we do it in Austin, do it in Houston, do it in Dallas, Fort Worth, or go to the outlying locations?
I agree with Ron. I think Lubbock would be a great location. I think you'd get a lot of funneling of some people, even from the West Texas area, from Abilene. So from Abilene to Midland, Odessa, all the way to Amarillo, You could pretty much set up a town hall in Lubbock, and I think it'd be a huge success.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
I like the idea of going to outlying locations rather than, seem like so much time we spend is in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin. And I think those are the folks that have the most difficult time connecting or coming to a board meeting, or those in the outlying location. So with that being said, Kevin, in the next couple of weeks, why don't you get with Darren and Ron and try to come up with a venue that we can have to schedule one of these meetings for Lubbock. And with that being said, we know we need one in San Antonio. We know that we need one in the Houston area. We know we need Dallas, Fort Worth. So if anyone has got a venue that we could accommodate, say 100 or 150 plumbers, bring them to Kevin. And I'm willing to do them as quickly as we can get them set up. Because I want to continue that. I think it's real important that we get feedback. Something that surprised me.
Mr. Chairman, you're on mute.
Thank you for telling me. One of the things that surprised me a little bit is one of the questions on this survey was, are you aware that the plumbing board has established a new testing center in Waco? And 40% of the industry answered they were not aware of that. And it's the one area that we probably have had the most publicity about and have talked about at every single board meeting we've had for the past 12 months. So that was a little surprising to me. But it just proves the point is we need to get out more. We need to talk more to the plumbers. Communication is a huge, huge part of what we're doing in our strategy going forward, because we're here because of plumbers and providers and continuing education folks and the consumers. So we have got to have a better presence and ramp up our communication efforts in that regard. So with that being said, we just plan as soon as Kevin can arrange a venue to do them. I think we'll continue to, maybe if a board member is available or two, we'll have to be careful not to have a quorum when we have these public town hall meetings. But certainly I'd like to have at least one or two board members there to get direct feedback from the industry. And we'll just do that every time we can get one set up from now to the end of the year. So staff, I just leave it to you to set one up as quick as you can. And maybe the next one we'll do an outlying location in Lubbock. And maybe Darren and Ron can help come up with a venue to do that. Today's meeting is going to be a Lisa Hill show. Lisa has got a lot to talk about, and I am really excited and really proud of what she's about to tell you that's going to happen. So Lisa, without saying anything further, I'm going to turn it over to you to give your report. And board members, I would encourage you to pay close attention to what she's doing and ask any questions, because we're transitioning into this computer-based testing. We've got 700 people that are in line. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge making stop handing out paper tests and converting over to computer-based testing. So Lisa, without stealing your thunder, I'm going to let you take over.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everyone. I do have a lot of stuff to tell about, and I'm going to go down my list, and then I'm going to get to the happy place here. On personnel changes, you met these two new folks that we have here, Kenneth and Lynn. I wanted to also say that our other new person in licensing is up and running now, and that is Carlina Herrera. And the person we hired prior to that, Blanca, she is helping in exam and licensing. And I can tell a big difference in our ability to cover the phone calls and the emails in the license renewals and how much faster they're getting done. And I want to say this is the first time I've been fully staffed in licensing in quite some time. So it's really exciting to have a staff over there and staff on the left and right. I couldn't be happier. So I'm expecting a lot out of everybody, and so far so good. The other thing I wanted to mention is, yes, we have been working on our customer service survey that Frank mentioned a while ago. And I've been pleasantly surprised, not too surprised, but it's pleasant to see that the majority of the other questions that they've answered, most of them are happy. And I can tell you that if you get an opportunity to complete the survey, the plumbers, it's worthwhile doing. If you have something in particular, there's an opportunity to tell us. And we do go through those that really have an issue and address them. So it's an important survey. And we also use the information in that survey to formulate our response and report a customer service survey along with our strategic plan. And it goes to several places within the legislative team. So we're excited about putting that together. We've also, which is included in our planning, we've recently performed a what we call a survey of excellence, and we do that through working with UT, and it's our staff, and it gives us an opportunity to see what staff need to do a better job, if they're happy, if they're comfortable, and that sort of thing. And all of these things we do from January to about middle of May, so that we can put this information together and help in our strategic planning and do these reports that are required of us. And so far, so good. I'm pleased. And the things that we do find that we need to work on, which there's always going to be something, it gives us an opportunity to address it. So both for the public and for the staff. I also wanted to bring to your attention that, oh, and let me back up. Speaking of personnel, I just can't talk enough about personnel, can I? The other thing that personnel are working really hard on, that three of these people were initially brought in for, was for fingerprints. And it's a long process, training and getting them access to look at that information. They don't actually look at the print, they look at the information that's connected to the prints. But getting set up and getting them set up and getting them trained, there's a lot of confidentiality that has to be done and all these different things. But so, and what we're seeing on the fingerprints is that even though we have not demanded that a certain rank send their information in, the plumbers have just been pouring in, just jumping on it and getting it done. And we've had a lot of companies just say, oh, we've had all of our people done, apprentices and tradesmen and everything. And so we're feeling that flowing in. And the one place that most everyone knows is that the tradesmen have gone about 1.5 years on renewal on fingerprints. They were our first rank, and that was our first learning curve to make it and expedite the process. And it's done well. And so now all the ranks are required if you're taking an exam. So no fingerprints, no exam. That's an easy one. The other thing that we have implemented was the renewal for inspectors. And the inspectors, there again, is another low number, but it gives us a chance to get a whole rank and a whole group. And so on renewals this year, the inspectors will be expected and required to have their fingerprints done. And the inspectors are so accustomed to renewing in January that the majority of them have already done their fingerprints. And so even though now the inspector, if the inspector also has a journeyman or a master, that inspector is going to renew at that different time, which might be June, July, August, whatever. So the whole process has rolled over quite well. The next renewal group we're going to be doing is the journeyman. And you can imagine that's a huge group. And there again, those floodgates have already been opened just a little bit. But when we really get rolling and you're wide open, it's going to be a lot for staff. And we anticipate having one more person. So should work quite well. But a lot of companies have done, like I said, their whole staff, the apprentices, everything. So I'm proud of staff. I'm proud of how far we got on it and how quickly we got it up and running. And I'm so glad we started on it before we were even required to do it, because it's a lot of work to get set up.
Lisa, let me throw out something, if I could, to get some board input on this. When I first came a year ago here, we had intended to take on the apprentices early in the process. And through Lisa and I discussing this, we thought the more prudent concentration should be on licenses rather than registrations. So we started making sure that all of the apprentices, not the apprentices, the tradesmen were first fingerprinted. And we've got, as I understand it, we've gone through a complete cycle there. So we feel confident that our tradesmen are, and now we're going to go to the journeyman plumber. And the significance of identifying them is once we go to the journeyman plumbers, they won't be able to renew their license until they get their fingerprint. As Lisa said, there's a big number there. There's some 22,000 journeymen, or almost 23,000 journeymen. So we have put the apprentices on hold. Not that they're not eventually going to have to be fingerprinted. But our thought process is this, is that we know that a tradesman, a journeyman, a master, a responsible master, they are in the industry and they're, for the most part, are here to stay. Apprentices, you have your highest degree of turnover. So because of our limited board staff, we don't want to emphasize putting all these 44,000 apprentices through and have a 20% turnover. That's a lot of work that the agency ended up doing, and they didn't stay in the industry. So we've decided to concentrate on tradesmen, journeymen, master, responsible masters, rather than opening the floodgates of those apprentices. Two schools of thought on that. Number one, it's going to be a huge volume when we open it up to doing apprentices. And it would overwhelm, I think, our staff if we tried to do that. But number two, from a practical standpoint, an apprentice can't work without supervision. So as long as we have the supervisors, the tradesmen, the journeymen, the masters fingerprinted first, at least that apprentice will be working with someone who has already been fingerprinted. Does the board understand and think that's a reasonable approach to take with this fingerprinting issue? Okay, no objection. That it's not really required board action. It's a staff function, but I want the board to understand why we have not concentrated on apprentices, which is our largest number. And the reason being, that's where also you have your greatest turnover. So we'll end up doing 5,000 or 6,000 fingerprints and background checks on people that won't even be here 6 months. So we are concentrating on those license types from tradesmen up first. Eventually, I think in 2025, our entire population is going to have to be fingerprinted, go through a criminal background check. But we're starting with those higher. So if that makes sense to the board, then Lisa, I think just direction to the staff, let's continue on that path.
And I do want to add one thing, that because we've determined that by the time they're eligible to get a residential utility installer or a drain cleaner, they've proven themselves that they're going to stay in the industry. So part of our next batch or ranking will be those individuals that are attempting to get an RUI or the drain cleaner. So, and that'll be when they apply. So at that point, that person will have already had their fingerprints, and then by 2025 or 2026, I guess, if they wanted to get a license, they'll be ready to go if they have the hours and have stayed in the trade. And so it's kind of it's a future looking place that they're trying to get to, and we're trying to get them there where we need them to be too. So your
But
additional.
Also, to be clear, there's nothing to stop anyone, whether they be an apprentice or a
Absolutely.
tradesman or a responsible master, anyone gets fingerprinting anytime they get ready to do it. And we would certainly encourage all of the industry to go ahead and get it done. The significance of identifying journeyman or tradesman by classification, once we turn that on, then you will not get your license renewed until such time as you get your fingerprint. Right now, if you're not in one of those selected groups, you can continue on, but eventually we're going to get everyone. So it's just an order in which we take them. But there's nothing to stop if you've got a company with 50 or 60 employees in it, made up of tradesmen, journeymen, apprentices. You're free to get them all fingerprinted if you choose to.
And I want to add just one more little thing on here. I think it's really important that and there's nothing wrong with it. A lot of people hire people that have backgrounds, and they've been rehabilitated and they're a great employee. And if that person, right when they get their apprentice, whatever it is they've done, I recommend they go ahead and get fingerprints. The processing for somebody that has a criminal background is much faster and much easier if they've gotten the fingerprints, because I'm going to tell you, it's still very difficult to go get paper records since the pandemic. So there may be other information we need, but get the fingerprints.
Ron, I think you had a comment.
Lisa, it's a little bit of a question or clarification. I know we had mentioned in previous meetings, like if you've been through the Identigo for license to carry on a handgun, that doesn't work. So, yeah, and I applaud the way you guys are approaching it. I think it's the prudent approach as far as which classifications you're going after in sequentially. But is there since like the license to carry don't work, is there, if a guy takes it going in as an apprentice and then 3 years down the road, is that still good? I mean, while the public's here.
Yes, sir. It's good. And what happens in the unfortunate event that they get some other conviction, it does pop up to us. We see on a national and a state level, if that individual gets an additional conviction, or even if they had no convictions and get one, we're going to see that. So it's absolutely the way to go, and it's good for as long as it's in our system.
Well, once you're fingerprinted,
You're in the system, and if you're fingerprinted this year and in 2025 you have a felony conviction, the agency is notified and we evaluate their license at that time. So once you're done, you're done. It's also important to know that just because you've been convicted of a felony doesn't necessarily mean you can't get a plumbing license. Each one of them are looked at individually. You look at the nature of the crime, when the crime was committed, does it have a direct relationship with dealing with the public or holding a plumbing license? So there are some felony convictions that, quite frankly, may even be egregious felony convictions, but if they don't directly relate to your job as a plumber, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't get a license. So don't assume just because you had a felony DWI 3 times that, and it ended up a felony, that you're going to get knocked out getting a license, because you might very well. So.
Okay, and just one other comment. The people early on that really complained about this, I think it's cited somewhat, but I think if most business owners look at it from a standpoint, we're probably doing them a favor. I think you want to know what your employees are, and I'm even considering that we do it for all people, not just licensed people, but I think it's a good thing for businesses too.
I'm unmuted. There we go. And one other thing, I don't think I had it, we sent notice of this out on fingerprints, but I don't think I had it on last meeting. I know I didn't. Now, anybody that you want to look up to see if their fingerprints have been processed in our system, right underneath their name, after you look them up on the public search site, you'll see it says fingerprint obligation met. Doesn't mean if they're good or bad or what. It means that those fingerprints are in our system and they have done their duty. And it's a great thing if you're planning on hiring somebody. I mean, you know, that part's over with. So it's worked quite well.
You know, Lisa,
Something else I want to add, and it'll come up in a discussion after lunch when we talk to Steve Davis in enforcement. This also plays a part in educating the public of why it's important to employ a licensed plumber versus an unlicensed plumber. A consumer can rest assured that if they invite someone into their home to do work, that they've had a criminal background check, that they're not some sex offender or pedophile unlicensed. So it's one of the huge, even that it's an inconvenience to employers sometimes and a plumber, it also can work to their advantage. It's a primary reason why a consumer should not use unlicensed people to do work. So that discussion is going to come up later in the meeting with Steve. And I look at it as a big plus for the industry. It's a big safeguard for the consumers. And it's a really important part of what we're doing going forward. So.
And as long as that person shows current with that fingerprint obligation, they've been processed. Now, if it shows expired and the fingerprint obligation has been met, it could be that there's some review process going on. But I'm going to tell you, they just turned out in droves, and I couldn't be prouder of how quick it's gone and how professional the plumber looks. And it's really done well.
what would you say the total number of criminal background checks would? And I'm not gonna hold you to this, but in general, what would you say?
I believe the last time I did it, it was somewhere around 7,800. You remember, Dawn? 7,800, something like that. And that's a while back before, and that doesn't mean that they're all processed, but there was about 7,800 processed and quite a few sitting there pending. So it's getting there.
It's getting there, but I'll tell you what, it's gonna slip on up on us before we know it, because that's probably 10% of our.
That's 10% of our total number of people that we've got. So even that's a big number, it's not even 50% of what we've got to do in the future.
Oh, no.
So
no, but
so we're going to have to really turn it on and get the employers and our CE providers can help us in their classes that they encourage the licensing base to go ahead and get your fingerprint, get it out of the way.
And you'll see it more and more with the requirement on the exam, and that's making that'll make a big dent in it, and they'll roll right on through. But the next, when we turn on the full process on the journeyman, it's gonna knock that number way up. So, but we're ready. We're in a good place.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention that we still have a reception posting out there for the public. Anyone that knows anybody that's interested. We also have another admin position posted. And I was telling Mr. Denton, normally whenever we post those positions, same situation with everybody that we've tried to hire. Normally the admin or a reception or customer service, I would get so many applications, I'd have to turn it off. And I'm not getting that. And it's out there. And we do have our eye on a couple of people. So maybe surprise, surprise. Next meeting, we'll have a couple more new ones. That's what we anticipate. So, all right. Oh, did I say that? I did say that the endorsements were going to have fingerprints, right? I did. Okay. Let me go on to my next item here.
And I think it's important too, and I know we're spending a lot of time talking about this fingerprinting. It's important for the board to know also that anyone,
Thank you.
whether you be tradesman, journeyman, master, responsible master, prior to taking a test, you got to have your fingerprint in. So regardless, if you're going to take a test, a part of that requirement to take the test is that you be fingerprinted. So everyone knew that we're moving through the ranks or getting it, and we'll just pick up the others as we can going forward. So
The big and exciting thing that's coming is computer-based testing. I'm so excited that we're actually going to attempt to go live on my birthday. So everybody's going to know my birthday because I'm going to tell it. I'm not going to tell the year I was born, just the day I was born. So that'll be May 17th. And that's what we anticipate. Not to say that something couldn't happen, but I feel pretty confident in that. And but I want to say up front, there's going to be little glitches and there's going to be hiccups. We planned for all of those things, but everything that we do has a start and a stop. And that's, I know staff gets tired of hearing me, but whenever we make a change, everything has a beginning, everything has an end. There's no way around it. It's a hurdle to get over. But I anticipate at the beginning of May that there'll be people that actually start the entire process of the application knowing that they are going to this computer-based testing. Prior to that, in the middle of April, we're going to be transitioning some people that have already been scheduled for remote locations to the computer-based testing. So rather than us driving to or giving them in Lubbock or wherever, whatever location it might be, they may already be scheduled for those remote locations, and we're going to transition them to actually take the exam in the computer-based fashion. So there'll be some changes going on. There'll be some outreach to people. And I got to tell you, the one thing that's going to be difficult is at some point we have to quit entering the applications the way they're coming in now, because the application process becomes different where we transmit data and where we receive data. So there'll be a period of time in April that maybe you're accustomed, you can go ahead and apply, but there's going to be at some point where there's going to be no applications, and there's going to be a period of probably about 2 to 3 weeks where we won't accept any applications. And so it's going to cause a little bit of a heartache. But if you get stopped in the middle of this transition, the good part is it's really not going to slow you down. It's actually going to speed you up, because once you get into the new process, it'll be faster. So we planned for a lot of different things, but we're excited. I've got a lot more work to do on it, a lot more testing to do on it. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of certifications of data. It's a tremendous amount of stuff. And it's not something I can just go throw to anybody and say, here, go try this. It requires a quiet room and careful viewing of it. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of time for everybody. And so we want to get it right. And, who knows, maybe we find some changes we want to make. The one thing that we're already seeing, and I want to talk about it just a little bit, is we've made changes in the written portion of the exam over the last couple of years. In particular, this last year had some changes, from significant changes to the journeyman. And so we're seeing the pass-fail rate in this last year. And I've mentioned it before, we don't want to see it go way down. We're still consistent. We're still close to hovering around that 70%, but it's a little bit down right now. 60, what did I say? I can't see it, but 67.3, I believe. So when we start the computer-based testing, I certainly don't want to see it fall way off. I don't anticipate it going way up either. And so as we've tested the test and the changes, we feel pretty comfortable with where we're going to be as we go to the computer-based testing and the additional questions, the changes in some of the questions and that sort of stuff. So, but the main thing is study and learn good sanitary plumbing. There's not a question on there that's not code neutral. You can find it in any code. It's basic plumbing questions. It's things that you'll learn as an apprentice and should be being taught. And if you study, you'll just move right on through. And there's also going to be a little period of time where, as they're preparing for this exam, and once we get into the full-blown applications, that they may feel a little pinch because they've already paid for the exam coming to us, and we may have to move some people over, and they are going to at some point have to pay again, and it's going to move a lot faster, so they're going to need to do their study earlier. Don't wait till the last minute. So there's a lot of parts and pieces to it, but I anticipate that it's going to go very well, and it's going to move right on through. And right now there are 735. Did I say? Yeah, 735 that are scheduled. It's a lot of folks. It is down some, and that's a good thing. The number of retakes is down just a little bit, which tells me that they're going, oh, I do need to study. So it's exciting, needless to say. There are 2 or 3, I think you'll see on your report there. And we still have some people that they do take the exam multiple times, but you know what? They don't give up. They keep trying, and whatever hardship or whatever thing is in their way, they figure out how to get it out of the way and they go on and pass. And we had a group last week, and I'll give you an example, and this was inspectors. There wasn't but 6 people in this group of inspectors, and we mixed the inspectors in with other ones now, but there were 6 inspectors. Half of them passed, half of them didn't. And there was 2 out of the 3 that did pass that weren't done until we were about ready to shut the door. And they were like, man, I was the last one, and the other one had left, and then another guy was there and said, oh, I'm the last one. I felt bad about being the last one, and I said, but why? You know, but you got to ride your own ride, take your own test, and keep on moving. And they're still an inspector. But 3 out of those 6 did not pass. But the 2 that were still there, those 2 out of the 3 that passed. So block everything else, take your time. And as we move to the computer-based testing, there won't be as much opportunity to say, can you give me some explanation on this question, or read it for me so I understand it? Or maybe we read it and we punctuate something in the sentence just so you understand. You're going to read it yourself on the screen. You're going to select from the questions. If you don't want to answer the question right then, the good thing is on the computer-based is you're going to be able to move past it, or you can flag it and come back to it. And at the end, it's going to tell you, these are the items you flagged. It's also going to tell you, these are the things you haven't answered. And so if you don't answer it or don't flag it, it's still going to tell you got to answer these things. So you got to complete it no matter what. I don't anticipate, once we move to the computer-based testing, I don't anticipate anyone needing any much extra time. I think we've got that pretty ready, or close to ready, prepared, let me put it that way, and moving forward. So you're going to hear from us at some point and say, ooh, you're gonna get to be the first batch that does computer-based testing. Won't that be exciting? So,
You know, Lisa, I'm going to tell you, there's nothing that we've done in the time that I've been here that excites me more than hearing turning this computer-based testing on. The biggest criticism our agency has had since day one is just 700 or 800 people. At one time, it was reported we had 1,700. I don't know if that was accurate or not, but it's a perception out there of this backlog of people. And just visualize this. Once we get this computer-based testing turned on, we'll have the capabilities of doing 100 or 200 tests a day if the applicants are ready. So any wait time that we have is not going to be because of the agency. It's going to be because the applicant is not ready to take the test. They'll be the one that's waiting and not us. The other thing that it does for us that's critical is that once we do computer-based testing, that relieves our examination staff from passing out pieces of paper and waiting around for them to take a test. So we can increase the volume of our practical exam. And we can also split people to Waco and here in Austin. So it is going to help us in every single regard. And by the time the next legislative session rolls around,
it'll be good to
or
go.
even before that, before the end of this fiscal year, our 700 wait time should get down to 100. And that 100 that are waiting are not going to be waiting on us. They're going to be waiting to prepare to take the test. So I don't think there's anything that has happened in this that affects the way this agency is run or affects the perception of this agency as much as this computer-based testing. Lisa and the staff I have a horrible, horrible habit of making everything simple as hell. Just do it. And I'm going to tell you, they have worked diligently. There is a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of switches to flip and analysis to do in putting this in place. And I couldn't be prouder of the staff doing it. And I am so, so pleased to have this finally off the ground. That's the one thing, the number one item, number one complaint from the legislature and from the industry is having to wait 3 or 4 months to take a test when you're ready. The funny thing about it is, I think we're going to find they're not going to move as quickly as we think they might, because if you recall, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we opened up an invitation to do 100 masters and journeymen in Waco, and I think we had 50 showed up. So we sent out notices to everyone that was waiting. If you want to take the test, you're ready to go, we'll take you. We did it 2 days. We did it on a Friday. And we did it on a Saturday. 50 people out of the 600 or 700 people, the invitations we sent out actually took the test. So once we get this computer-based testing in place, it will not be this agency that's the stumbling block. It'll be the industry themselves. And it's okay. I mean, it's all right. We don't want you to take the test until you're ready to take it. But don't bitch to us that you can't having to wait 3 or 4 months. It'll be you. It won't be us. And that is as it should be. But Lisa, I appreciate you and all the staff, the examination folks that have worked so diligently in converting this over from paper to computer. It's a lot bigger deal. And I have a terrible habit of making everything just simple. Just flip the switch and do it. But anyway, they've done a good job. And I'm real proud that we're finally going to get there. So.
Well, I feel about as much pressure as I can possibly feel right now because I've publicly announced it, but I feel confident enough that we've got the snags worked out that it's going to happen as I say. And then the unknown snags, I'll deal with them as they occur. But
Well, Lisa, I want you to know, and I think the board recognizes this, I'll speak for you. We realize there are going to be some issues in making that transition. But you know what? It's just something at some point in time, you got to pull the trigger and do it. And we're ready to do it. And we'll work through those issues in a matter of a month or two. And it's going to change this agency tremendously. It's going to absolutely, once they take that written test, Lisa tells me they have got the capability of notifying us electronically and the applicant themselves can then schedule the practical test. I guess while they're still sitting at Pearson View, is that right? Or do they have to contact us again to do the practical?
No, they'll actually, their application will already be here and approved, and we'll know the next day that you passed. But it'll actually open up the practical, and it'll be on a list, and then we'll see the list, and we'll take that list and we'll start plugging people in. So it's a few days for the whole process to occur, and we'll get faster at it as as we do it. And as we determine that we can do a double shift, which is what we anticipate doing, some in the morning, some in the afternoon. And once we get fully online at Waco, but we'll know, they'll know quickly whether they passed, and then we'll know by the next morning that they passed. And as we get the file process and the upload process going perfectly, it'll be really fast. And then they'll get a notice from us that says, hey, we scheduled you for your practical exam on such and such day. So then they'll come take their practical exam wherever it is that we've scheduled them, and they'll be ready to go. As a reminder, they do have to pass the written first. So, and the beauty of this is that once they pay for the exam and we authorize them to take that written exam, they get 5 attempts, and that 5 attempts, that's not 5 free tries. That's 5 authorized tries. And that's allowing for the 30 days, the 60 days, the 90-day study periods. If in fact you fail, you have that opportunity to study again before it's going to let you to reschedule yourself. Bear in mind, it's not going to be any different than it is here. If you fail, you're going to pay again to go sit in front of the computer. You're not going to pay again for your practical because you've already paid for that, if in fact you need both parts. But you're going to get this authorization, so you're not going to go back through us. If you do all these 5 attempts and that 30, 60, 90 days fully kicks in, that application and authorization is going to end up expiring just after that year period, and you will have to come back and get reauthorized because something in your life could have changed. So we're going to look at it again. The other thing I want to add on the computer-based testing is it's very, very important if your name on your driver's license says Kenneth Joe Biddle, it's important that your plumbing license says Kenneth Joe Biddle.
Bill.
Is that what you want to be? So, but maybe he prefers to be called Joe, and Kenneth doesn't prefer to be called Joe. But if you're a person that has had an apprentice card for a long time and somehow you snuck through the gate and got Joe on your apprentice card, and we get you signed up as Joe, and you get to the third party and your driver's license says Kenneth, you're not going to get through. So if you have a name issue that needs to be addressed, by all means, tell us. There's not that many, but I know there might be a few, and we periodically do find them. But what we've put in place over the last year in anticipation, and because we have seen some errors, is that we want to ensure that we have the name match, same as on the driver's license. And what occurs now is whenever you apply for an apprentice, you attach a copy of your photo ID. So we know exactly how your name is. And, but I'm going to tell you, there's still a few old licensees, and it really won't matter because they've already got a license. And it may say JC, and JC, if you're listening, you know who you are. But maybe their card all this time said JC. But there's not going to be any apprentices that slip through anymore because of the need for the government issued photo ID. We want to make sure the names match, And when they walk in the door, that Kenneth is Kenneth. So, but you can't get an apprentice without a photo ID now anyway. So we want to know who you are. We want to know what your name is, what your middle initial is, what your date of birth is. I know we're kind of nosy like that, but it's going to make all the difference in the world because we don't want someone to be turned away. And if we see that there is some kind of error on that as we're processing people, we're going to make sure we address it. And it's also very important that if you change emails or you don't have an email or whatever the case may be, make sure we get it. We want to be able to communicate because it's going to be a fast electronic process once we get up and running. So, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'll quit talking here in just a minute, sir.
Now, you keep talking. As long as you're giving good news, I want you to keep going.
I've got a couple more things too.
You know, board members, I would refer you, take a look at the first tab in your board books. It shows you the examination locations that are across the state. And you'll see a Texas map with about 40 or 50 different locations where these applicants can take their test. And if you keep turning, it shows the number of workstations at each of those, the number of days that they're open. And keep in mind that we are sharing this Pearson VUE sites with other industries that are also giving tests. So someone showing up to take a journeyman plumber might be sitting right next door to someone that's taking a registered nurse test. But we are going to I'm going to say virtually unlimited capacity to give these tests without a wait time. When you look at this, I just couldn't be happier with this. And something else as an added bonus or a benefit, if we have someone out of state, say from Montana or somewhere else that meets all the qualifications to be a journeyman or a master plumber, and all they have to do is take the test, Pearson VUE, you can take this test at the same cost anywhere in the United States at a Pearson VUE location. So you don't have to come to Texas to take the test. So we can actually test them in their home state, and they pass it, issue them a license before they ever get here. So it is a game changer for us. It's a wonderful thing. I can't wait for it to happen. Happy birthday, Lisa. It will. No, I mean, we're committed. There's no option. It's going to work. It may have some bumps but we are committed, and it's going to work. Whatever it takes for us to make it work, we're going to make it work. So we're pretty patient, and we understand there's going to be some blips in it. And as far as the test scores go, Darren made this statement earlier that he anticipates the test scores are going to drop because there's been allegations made that people are sharing information when they come in to take the paper test, that the answers on the first 10 questions are things like that. That's going to go away. And I think Darren may be correct. We may see a drop in test scores because these things are going to be jumbled and mixed around. And you can rest assured when they take this computer-based test and the practical exam, they are trained and they are qualified to be a plumber. And if that test number drops, so what? When we got into this a year ago, we had this backlog of things. We had a pass rate, and we had an option. We could have dumbed down that test or done away with a portion of it and done away with the backlog. And instead, we chose to keep the test as it is and to address it through this computer-based testing rather than other means. So I think that once we get this up and running, and we're even going to refine that test, the questions as we go, we'll be able to, only 2% of the people that answered this question correctly, then it's ambiguous, it's not clear. We'll have the ability to analyze those questions to make sure we're properly asking the question. So it's going to be a work in progress going forward. But I think once we're up and running and once we get this going, we will have the most qualified plumbers in the United States coming through Texas here. So I am absolutely convinced of that. and we'll have some documentation to show it. So I'm real proud of it. If it had happened a year ago, it wouldn't have been too soon for me. Matter of fact, I even said I thought it was going to happen a year ago, and we're finally doing it a year later. So
I wish I could have done it faster, but I feel a lot more confident in my baby steps. So
well, I think it's been done correctly. And you know, the bad thing about it is this backlog of people in a year's time is going to be nothing but a faint memory. Then we'll be complaining because we got a 1 week delay to take a test. So anyway, let's enjoy the incremental steps that we're taking while we're doing them, because a year from now we'll be complaining, well, gosh, it took me a week to take a test. So, and that's okay. So anyway, good job, Lisa. Go ahead.
there we go. I'm unmuted now. We're also in the process of putting together a new continuing education program. We have so many things going at one time, and these are big items. And we anticipate having a virtual type of meeting in April. I know we're having one in April, and I had Dawn send out a tentative date. I may have to move that back about a week, but either way, it's going to be virtual. We're going to do it here if some people want to come here. And what we're going to do is we're going to demo the new program for storage and submittal of continuing education credits to the providers. And it's going to be different. And for a while, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be transitioning from one program to another program. And so it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. And at the same time, there's some rules that are going to change regarding CE that are going to work with the new program that don't necessarily apply to the old program. So it's a lot going at one time. But we want to go ahead and have a demo from the provider of that program to the CPE providers, not instructors. It's the providers, it's their staff, the staff that are actually going to use the program. The instructors, unless they're a one woman or one man show, don't use the program. So it'll be a limited number of people, and we'll offer it online, and we're going to do it here. And we will pin that day down shortly, Dawn. We're going to pin it down, and I have it marked in 2 places on the calendar. And my hold up on it right now is making sure that the demo is complete as can be to show them. So we're excited about that program too. And it's going to give Dawn the ability to do a lot closer audits of what's coming in, when it's coming in, and the type of credits that they're getting. So, and as we move forward on it, the training will eventually appear on the new program too. For right now, they'll still be entering their training programs on the old system. So a lot going on for providers too. And then later on, when things settle down, maybe in the fall, maybe we'll have one of those giant parties of providers and instructors and just everything. Who knows? We'll see. So I wanted to make sure the providers, I hadn't forgot about you. I'm real focused on computer-based. And so we're on the backside of that. We're working on provider information. We're working on provider rules, programs, and we're going to have a little get together on that so that y'all can be fully aware of how the new program is going to work. And as long as you're able to use the old program, that's fine. It's still going to work for quite a while. So current number of licensees, I included that, sir.
Before you read those 2 subjects, are there any questions on the computer-based testing or how that thing get it under
I was asking the board, are there any questions on the computer-based testing of
the mechanics of how that's going to work, or the content of the questions, or anything? None? Okay. Means you did a good job explaining it. Of course, we've been talking about it for a year. There shouldn't be a lot of questions asked. The other thing, I want to thank the providers. They have been extremely patient with us in this rollout, or this meeting that you're about to have to give them information. I realize they've been kind of operating in the blind on a lot of this. It's not clear, but as I said a couple of meetings ago, it's like a huge puzzle, and these pieces will start coming into place. And I think the meeting that Lisa has got planned for the providers is going to answer an awful lot of questions for them, but as far as the mechanics of how it's going to work. And Lisa, did I hear you say that we'll be operating the old system as well as the new one until such time as we make a total transition?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I just like the computer-based testing for plumbers. There's no doubt there's probably going to be some glitches in this, but we're aware of that, and the staff is going to be very attentive to dealing with these issues as they arise. Anything you do that large is going to require, it's going to have some glitches in it, most likely. But just know, providers, that no one is going to be disenfranchised because of a glitch in a system. We will fix it. If there's an issue comes up, Lisa and her staff will jump on it, and we will fix whatever that issue is. So a lot of things happening in the month of May, in addition to your birthday.
That's true.
Sure.
That's true.
Now you can go ahead, unless the board had any questions about computer-based testing or the CE meeting with the providers. So
Yeah, I just didn't want the providers to feel like they've been left out, but I've been very focused on computer-based testing. You can see why. And but we are transitioning them to a program, and we'll talk more about during the rules. We've got our next meeting. We've got our rules that are going to apply, and that'll work with the new system and new materials, and so it's a lot of stuff. But a good little meeting and a little round table with providers, sometimes, you know, it'll generate an idea or something that we need to change or whatever, and focus on the use of the program to make sure that everybody gets the credits that they deserve.
you know, Lisa and I were talking yesterday, even if this meeting with providers might be a little premature, that may not be a bad thing, because providers are pretty good about pointing out some what ifs and what if this happened or that happened. So actually having this meeting before actually going live with it may really work to the advantage of the agency as well as the providers, because they're pretty good about asking questions, and they're the ones that are actually doing the job. So it'll allow them to give us a lot of what if this happens type questions that we maybe can build into the system before we turn it on live. So
that's exactly what it is in looking at it and talking and testing some stuff. I found something that concerned me, and so it kind of spurred another conversation going another direction, and what we had to build into it for future use. And so I expect and have no doubt that I'll get more ideas by having this meeting, and in the long run, it's going to be the way to go. So
I think you've got some experts to tell you why something won't work.
yeah, because I don't use it. I don't use it every day. And Dawn doesn't use it like they use it every day. I put some current statistics in your board package as well. Our inspectors, with our transition and renewal period and all of that said, our current, we have 1,575 inspectors. That's the most inspectors that we've had at one time since I've been here. And based on what I hear from the political subdivisions, they still need more. So if there's anyone that's ready to transition from the plumber and jump the fence to inspector, I bet there's jobs out there for that too. So, and we're trying our best to keep those inspectors mixed in and get them in where we can, because the cities are just you know, they're blowing and going. They've got so much growth and so many inspections to do.
Hey, Lisa, let me ask a question. And I shouldn't say this, admit that I didn't know it, but I didn't realize you didn't have to be a plumber in order to be an inspector.
Correct.
So can you tell me, and for the benefit of the audience, who could be an inspector that does not currently hold a plumbing license?
A sanitary engineer or an architect or someone that has equivalent education from another state. Someone that goes and gets their training from a licensed inspector, much like what a plumber or an apprentice gets their training from a licensed plumber. So they go ride with them, accumulate the hours, take the additional training, and they'll take code certification classes. They'll have on-the-job training. They have a selection. They could take a backflow class. They could take a med gas class, a variety of items. And for years and years and years, you did have to be a plumber, but now it's an inspector that has equivalent education. So they will have gone through a lot of classroom. They will have gone through on-the-job site training. Maybe they are a sanitary engineer that does plumbing all the time, has no problem whatsoever, will run you right through. There's several paths to get there.
Bill could be an inspector, could he not?
Yep, Bill could. How about it, Bill?
Come on, Bill.
Sir.
Is there such a thing as an industry association for inspections, like ATSCC?
Yes. Yes, there is a plumbing TSBPE, Texas State Association of Plumbing Inspectors, and that they were planning on reintroducing one of their conferences this year. I don't know if it's going to occur or not because they hadn't had it the last couple of years with the pandemic going on. But that's
I don't think I've ever met anyone from that group.
That's one of the associations that it's not a large association, but if in fact they have their program this year, it'd be a great opportunity for you to get to meet them. There's also the building official group, which is a large number, and we just participated in one of their conferences, has a large number of inspectors that attend it. Building Professional Institute up in Irving also is a large group of plumbing inspectors, mechanical, plumbing, all the different trades are there too. So, and we try to go to those as much as possible, because if we participate in one of the trainings there, it gives those soon-to-be inspectors an opportunity to meet with us and really understand whatever's going in the law, their duties, their responsibilities as we see it. And we interact with building officials in that capacity as well as the ones that are about to be licensed. So,
Lisa, can you hear me? It's Dave.
yes.
I was just curious from the residential side, getting house plumbing looked at, especially out in the counties. In the cities, we don't really have much issues. Is there a way to maybe in the future come up with a residential specialty inspector that all he does is inspect houses? Because it is you just mentioned a few things that make it, they don't need med gas, they don't need this. I've got my ICC plumbing inspector certification from the ICC, but technically that's not enough to inspect homes. I was just curious, could we maybe work on doing that to alleviate or maybe get more to that 1,500 that you just mentioned, focusing on residential?
While Lisa gets ready to respond to that, I would suspect that's going to take a legislative, some statutory changes, which would create a new classification, which I think is a good idea. If ever we get asked about it. If we've got a shortage, I would think the Texas Municipal League might be involved in some type of legislative initiative to expand their capacity to do those inspectors, because with
just 1,500. Obviously, every municipality doesn't have a licensed plumbing inspector working for them. So Lisa, what are your thoughts on that? We could not do that without a statutory change. Is that correct?
That's how I feel as well. There's been discussion of that over the years. It never went anywhere. I see it would be an easy thing for us to implement, but I see it as definitely something that would come about through the legislative process. But it would be a very easy process for us to put together. And it's not uncommon for the plumbing inspectors to wear multiple hats, but there are still cities that, you know, they only have one inspector, and they're wearing construction hats and other hats too. So there's a need, no doubt.
You know, while you're hesitating, board members, how about let's take a 10-minute break.
That'd be good for me. Yeah. Talk about these.
Let's take a break until 20 minutes. Well, will you say unmute?
I'm sorry, I was not unmuted, but I was saying it's 11:30. Let's take a 10-minute break until 20 minutes till 12, and then we'll pick back up with Lisa's term. We're 11:45. See, Dave is there. Hi, Dave. Okay, I believe we've got everyone back in place, and our plan is, Lisa, for you to go ahead and complete your report, and then Kenneth will pick up with yours immediately after lunch, and then Lynn, and then Steve. So Lisa, it's all yours again.
Yes, sir. Let me see where I left off. The one other thing we wanted to show, and I wanted to show it just before lunch, is we've made some improvements to our website. And Kevin, now that we've transitioned Kevin from one place to another to doing all the communication items and the website, he's done some good work on it, and we've had some feedback on it too. So we've implemented those feedback items. And also, I wanted to just touch base on one other item. We do continue, and don't miss your chance if we've scheduled you in one of the remote locations in the next month or two. I do have that statistical information broken down on the report of the number of exams we've given. And I will put the statistical reports out for the CPE providers after our board meeting. So that's on there. And the website's my last item. So,
Okay.
and I don't know who all can see it, but I'm going to quit talking and let Kevin show you the changes to our website real quick.
This will be short and sweet. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So basically the big new element is a slider at the top. This, I don't know, the way the website was before, it didn't enable us to deliver, you know, breaking information. And this way we can deliver several big messages right there above the fold on the site. So each one of these, we can have as many as we want. We can do this real quick. So if the phones are down for whatever reason, we can just put something up real quick. It's clickable. And yeah, and then below that, we've added this section here that is just the latest posts that we've added to the website with a little blurb there. And then we've cleaned up below that. So there's not as much length to the page. I think just in general, it cleans up the site a bit. And like I said, it enables us to deliver breaking information. So That's it. This will be going live either today or tomorrow, definitely by Monday.
One of the suggestions that I understand it that we had from I think it may be a staff member, is the fingerprint requirement portion was down toward the bottom, and that was moved up right underneath the main page as a result of a recommendation from one of our staff members. Since that's kind of the hot button right now, it'll be easy for an applicant, since fingerprinting is a big deal for us, for him to find it right off the bat. So, and board members, any observations or suggestions that you might have on our website? Yes, Mr. Justin.
Well, this kind of ties into our later discussion about, enforcement and strategies to keep unlicensed plumbers out. But have we considered putting a consumer section, readily available on the website? Because this is outstanding for people who are in the industry, the licensees and registrants. But I feel like one of the things we need to look at going forward, and like I said, this is probably a much bigger issue and may even go into our LAR, going forward, is some consumer facing stuff to help educate the general public as to why it's a bad idea to hire some random dude in a pickup truck to install your gas water heater, so that just food for thought, and maybe, future, down the line stuff, but I just wanted to put that on the radar.
That actually is something that we have a separate page for, but we're going to expand on it. And we're in the process of revamping a video that's going to be more consumer oriented. And if you would like to help proof that, I'd be happy to engage you on it.
Yeah, I mean, not to be doom and gloom, but I think, the average consumer doesn't understand that they could literally die if their plumbing's installed improperly. And that's why we're here, is to protect that. And so, getting that information out on the consumer side, I think is just as important as being good and accessible for our licensees.
Justin, you fell right into our trap. We talked about that yesterday. And that's exactly what we're looking at. It's a great idea that you're right. Consumers really don't care about town hall meetings or our relationship with TS, the Texas State Technical College. But we definitely need a link where that consumer, why should I hire a licensed plumber versus an unlicensed plumber? And also an additional link that allows that consumer to go to the provision we have on our website that lists all of our licensed plumbers in Texas. And all you have to do is enter your email address, and it'll give you every licensed plumber within a 25 or 50 mile radius of your location. So
yeah,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's something that came to mind the other day to me. I saw something on the historical commission, it was the anniversary of the New London school explosion. And it just reminded me, really why we're all here. That 300 people died because of improperly connected gas piping. And of course that was before the board existed. But, I think a lot of times we get kind of inwardly focused on ourselves and our licensees in the industry, and we forget to, spread that message to the consumer that, that it really is life and death safety issues that you need to have a licensed plumber for.
Great idea.
Kevin, I have one maybe suggestion, being that I have really elderly eyes and trying to find things. The find a license registration at the top. Anyway, put that in a separate box or make it a little bigger. So you go to the site and you don't see that. You're scrolling the page and it's a little tough to find.
Yeah, absolutely. We could do something. Sorry, is my microphone working? Okay. Yeah, we could easily do something like that. It's a great idea.
We actually do have a portion of that new strategy that was difficult to build upon during the pandemic that's focused on the consumer. And that New London school was instrumental in a lot of the things that we do. And we have a lot of historical data on that too. And that might be a really good thing to go ahead and tie back. The program that we worked with the Department of Emergency Management during the storm, we're going to put that back where it's more readily available, the one that Mr. Denton spoke about a while ago too. So, and I'm excited to have your help on it. I'm looking for all the help I can get.
That happened in 1937, that New London explosion, of school. And how many people were killed? Like 200 or 300? 300 plus people.
Over 300 people, students, staff, parents.
And as I recall, a gas line was inappropriately connected, which allowed gas to accumulate under the school, and it ignited and blew the whole damn school up.
Shop teacher switched the bell sander on and the spark ignited the gas in the crawl space.
Any other questions for Lisa or on her? Or Lisa, is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we break for lunch?
No, sir. I may think of something else before we're done, but I think I got every single note done. And I'll be able to expand more as we get closer to going live with some of these new programs and that sort of thing. There's going to be some big announcements out on our website, procedural items.
You know, the one thing that I was puzzled when I looked at Pearson View's map, is there a reason they don't have a testing center in Fort Worth?
One right
In
there.
Arlington.
Yeah.
In Arlington, but not in Fort. They've got one in Dallas. They've got one in Arlington, but they don't have one in Fort Worth. That's a big market. I wonder why they don't have one.
The Arlington area has always been real popular for the Fort Worth people to go to. Number one, you've got the Interstate 30 and 35 to get there, and 20. And so it's pretty accessible for just about any part of Fort Worth to get to that Arlington one. It's kind of that it's not really called mid cities, but it's centrally located.
When you do have the third-party sites in Weatherford and Cleburne that aren't too far either.
And Weatherford and Cleburne, yeah, I can get the third-party ones. I think the Cleburne one is probably will get some use for the southern tip out there.
Is there any advantage? Does Pearson View want additional sites? In your conversation, are they seeking additional sites? Are they?
They will expand as the need becomes, and they anticipate with the addition of us and possibly some, and I can't totally speak for them, but just in my conversations, they do anticipate with the addition of other license types and our demand that they may be expanding some other areas. And as far as I understand, they have some in their pockets that can be utilized and added.
I suppose I guess that's kind of their business, and
yeah,
it looks like they're pretty geographically, they're pretty well spread out that would reach most of our licensing base. I guess what I'm thinking is, and I've tried to go through a whole meeting without talking about TSTC, but I'm not going to make it. They've got 10 campuses across the state, located across the state. I don't know why TSTC is not a testing center.
That conversation is probably going to be developed some. We did have a little discussion with the availability and their setup. There's certain criteria that Pearson has in place that anybody can go out and read from the Pearson View's website, and it's about how to become one of these centers and the criteria that has to be met to do it. It has to do with the protected server and protected internet and security and all that type of stuff.
Well, and keep in mind, it's a business. So, I mean, it's the more locations they open up, the more personnel they're going to need as proctors to do it. So, I mean, it's a supply and demand thing. Mm-hmm. Convenience is not the only consideration taken, and it's their business. So,
yeah.
And I think they have more than sufficient locations to accommodate us.
Yeah.
It would appear they do anyway. So,
Yeah, I think we're covered quite well as far as the locations, but that conversation's been had, and it won't surprise me that other places don't pop up.
It's 12 o'clock. Any other comments or questions before we break for lunch? If there are none, let's take a lunch break until 12:35. That gives us 35 minutes for lunch. So, okay, let's break 12 o'clock. We'll break till 12:35. Would appreciate it. It is 12:37. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. And before we proceed on, Lisa, Bill brought up a question that we refrained from discussing during lunch because we're not supposed to do it outside of public. But Bill, do you want to weigh in on that issue of psychometric testing at some point in time? You may not even remember what we were talking about because we didn't talk about it, but basically you asked the question that at some point we would be able to analyze these questions, and that is an option that Pearson VUE does offer. We did not purchase that as a part of our original package. Is that right, Lisa?
The reports are there, and we'll easily be able to determine if a question is not suitable or the pass-fail rate of that question. It's all part of the package. The extremely detailed stuff you can get more of, but we certainly will be able to see that. And we keep tabs manually whenever we change a question, how they're doing on it. So that tells us whether or not our question's good or not. We have our own version of it that we've used for years, but having the electronic version is going to be really nice and much faster. So yeah, if it's inadequate for determining that person's ability on a subject, and or if it has a high rate of failure, is it because it's worded wrong, that sort of stuff. Yeah, we're excited to see all that breakdown. Have someone else look at it. UT originally assisted with our exam that we give.
Bill, I think you recognize this, and Lisa, I'm sure you do too, but psychometric testing is a real science. It's not something you do off the seat of your pants. They actually have the ability to do, to analyze these questions and the answers. And it's going to be a work in progress going forward. So I think eventually we're really going to have a really good, finely tuned test. But just over time, if someone answers, if a question gets answered 100% of the time, nobody ever misses it, or if someone never gets it, there's something either wrong with the answers or the question. So Pearson VUE will have the ability to analyze that data as we're going forward and make modifications as appropriate. So good point. It's going to open up a lot of things that are going to make a better quality of plumber in the long run. So Kenneth, are you ready to make your presentation on financial?
Yes, sir. If you're ready to listen to me.
We're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Biddle. I am the Director of Financial Operations for the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners. For the record, if everybody would turn with me to tab 6, page 1, I'm going to go over the financial report for the quarter ending February 28th, 2022. As of February 28, 2022, we've spent approximately $1.2 million of our $3 million appropriated budget. And then we've also transferred $120,000 to HPC approximately for our contribution to their operations. I've added a new column for everybody, column 4 on the top section. And column 3 on the bottom section gives you projections of what I expect to spend for the rest of the year with all of our knowns. So right now I'm looking at approximately $354,000 we've got to play with for the rest of the year for budget, including about $48,000 in conference and seminar fees, which will carry over from fiscal year to fiscal year. Out of that money, we're looking at hiring a few additional staff. We've got some additional resources we're planning on buying for our facilities in Waco for that testing site. And then a few other odds and ends throughout the fiscal year that come up as emergencies arise and things happen throughout the fiscal year. It gives us a little bit of breathing room for the last 6 months of the fiscal year. My projections are for the time period March 1st, 2022 through August 31st, 2022. Does anybody have any questions about the first page of this?
Members, one of the questions I ask is why is our original appropriations $3,036,000 and our budget was $120,000 less? And Kenneth explained to me this morning is that $120,000 that goes to HPC is not included in our regular operating budget.
Yes, it's not included in what we're going to be able to expend as an agency. It's a legislatively mandated transfer to HPC. So I show that in the first column what our original appropriations were, where you can go back to the General Appropriations Act and you can go back to the House Bill 2 and you can find and tie to those numbers. And then I show the transfers out in the next column, which is our transfers out to HPC plus any additional revenues we have that we've collected this fiscal year to net that $120,000. The net of the $3 million and $120,000 is what I show for an operating budget by our object of expense in the second section.
And I'm telling you what I spoke to Kenneth about yesterday. The estimated balance of $354,000, that is assuming that we continue exactly what we're doing now without adding any new employees or buying anything in addition outside of our budget. But as Lisa was explaining yesterday, we have 33 FTEs right now?
Yes, sir.
And we're authorized for 42?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So sometime between now and August, we'll be picking up another several employees, and that will eat in, that's not accounted for. So that will eat into that $354,000 excess.
And we'll be monitoring this on a monthly basis, and I'll have financial reports on a monthly basis to share with Lisa and Frank as he requests them. But I'm expecting to see that number pare down a little bit, but we should still have a pretty good chunk of money for the rest of the fiscal year as we see that paring down. I would still estimate we're going to have over $200,000 that we're looking at using for Waco and additional supplies for Austin, including some of our exam supplies we have in our back storage facilities. We're getting ready to make a significant purchase for that. And I understand that we're looking at doing some furnishings and some supply updates and purchases for Waco too, that will eat into some of that balance that I haven't planned for yet.
Any questions from board members on that first sheet?
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir, Darren.
So the 33 FTEs that we have currently on staff, you're saying we've got 42, but we're not budgeted for 42. We're only budgeted for the 33.
We're budgeted for 42. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we take on the additional 9, we're budgeted already for that.
We have budget for it. It's a matter part of that budget is sitting at $118,372. We received in Article 9, Section 18 of the General Appropriations Act. So we got to move that money around a little bit depending on where they all fall in at and what kind of salary savings we had for the year.
Okay. I just didn't know if we were having to accommodate those in the future. So there you go. Okay. That's all I had.
And we use those salary savings for other purchases throughout the year. Whenever we have those vacant positions that aren't filled for 6 months, we'll take that money, we'll pull it back and we'll use it for something else.
You bet. No, I appreciate that.
Okay, the next page, page 2, deals with our revenues collected for the various types of exams and licenses we offer. Right now, we're tracking pretty much on par with what we did last year. I do want to draw your attention to the inspector revenues because of the change in making that an annualized. Instead of having on a certain date, they're accepting those licenses throughout the fiscal year now. So we're going to see that revenue start to increase throughout the fiscal year. I think it used to be in January, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but now we're going to start seeing that over a 12-month period. So that revenue will eventually catch up, but because this is the 6-month period specifically, we didn't see that surge in revenues in inspectors. And you'll see it also in the actual license renewals on the next page, where we're sitting at about 21% for inspector revenues, and we're sitting at 28.6% for inspector resident for the inspector resident fire protection specialist. So any of those licenses that are now going to throughout the fiscal year instead of a specific time period, you're seeing that reduction, and you're seeing that impact to the budget or to the revenues we're collecting, and you're seeing that impact to the license renewals on the next page. And those are the ones I specifically wanted to point out and draw your attention to, were those, because they're so far off of where we should be. That's the reasoning behind that.
So everyone follow what he's talking about on the inspector thing. At one time, prior to this year, all of the inspectors renewed in January. So we basically had a huge influx of revenue off the inspectors in January. And since we've changed that now to renewing on an annual basis, those will just come on their anniversary of their license rather than in January, which is a great thing. But that will catch up by the end of the year. And also keep in mind, since other than Milton, this is the first board appointment for all of our board members, with the exception of myself and Milton. Our fiscal year is August 31st or September 1 to August 31st. So our fiscal year ends in August 31st. Also keep in mind, and we talked about this at the last board meeting, our revenue is down roughly $1 million as a result of us cutting the fees for the master plumbers by $100 a piece. But that is by design. And we, as I understand talking with Kenneth, we are, even with that $1 million reduction, our revenue is well exceeding our budget. So bottom line, it would appear, and I think Kenneth would agree with this, we're in pretty good shape going into the second half of this fiscal year.
Right now, our projected revenues for FY22 are approximately $4 million, where it used to be $5 million before we made the license change. Our appropriations are $3 million a year. So we're still $1 million under what our collected revenues are, our projected collected revenues are for FY22. But as Lisa indicates, yesterday, what we're doing is we're seeing, with the population growth, we're seeing that volume pick up. So we're expecting those revenues to start picking back up again. And, the decision comes as part of our legislative process about what do we want to request in the next legislative session that stays within that revenue potentially.
Also, it's significant to mention that we are going to lose some revenue, some additional revenue, in addition to that $100 we cut off the master plumber, by not charging for renewal licenses on endorsements. But still, even with that coming, even with that taken into consideration, we're still in good shape on the revenue and expense side of it. And our goal will be, our appropriations is much less than what we actually need.
It's about 75% of the projected revenues right now.
So we desperately make sure that we spend the money that's been appropriated to us by the end of the year. And Lisa and Kenneth will be monitoring that on a monthly basis to make sure that happens. So anyway, go ahead, Kenneth.
Okay. Page 3 of my report kind of mirrors what I just talked about on the revenue side. You're going to see the same thing on the renewals of those licenses. You're going to see the inspectors down in the 20s right now because of what I just talked about. Everything else is tracking along with what the revenues are showing. And if there's any questions on this I'd be more than happy to answer them or pass it off to Lisa to bail me out on this one.
We will, as we transition to computer-based testing, we'll also see some lost revenue that will be going to Pearson VUE that was before coming to us. But several meetings ago, it was explained to me that less than 15% of the total revenue of our agency comes from examinations. The lion's share, 70–80% of it, comes from license and renewals.
So that's not going to have a significant impact on our agency. Some things that we've already done, not charging for those renewals on the endorsements. So, Kenneth, I always ask Richard this, and I'll ask you the same thing probably every meeting. Is there anything other than what you've mentioned here today? Is there anything that is of any concern to you, or that the board should pay particular attention to, or looks like we're heading into trouble? And I'll ask you every time, but I want you to know, since you're new, that we want and expect you to give us a heads up on anything from a financial standpoint that looks like it's awry or we're heading into trouble on it. So you are free to,
Yes,
as
sir.
always, say anything you want to our board and keep us informed.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll do that in a second. Frank, what I wanted to point out on this last page 4 of the schedule you have, you can see where we're kind of tracking, where we were sitting at about $5.3 million in revenues collected last year. And right now we're tracking to collect about $4 million like we've been projecting because of the master license, the master, I keep forgetting the terms here. I'm still working on the terms, guys. The responsible master plumber change in fees, we're expecting that decrease to 4 million. And right now we're tracking right at $4 million. So that's just kind of going to show you where we were in previous fiscal years and where we are now. And we're really seeing the impact to our, through 6 months, we're seeing the impact to our financials right now, as we projected. The only thing I talked to Frank about yesterday that, you know, strategically is we want to make sure we're, and then Lisa's working on this, but the hard part is trying to get people in here to fill these positions. It's hard. It's a hard job market right now. That would be my only strategic concern about the financials right now, is the FTEs and just trying to get those positions filled with qualified people and getting those applications in. And that's a challenge right now, I think, across the state.
Lisa, specifically, what positions do we have available to be filled between now and the end of the year?
We have an admin, which will go in enforcement. We have another licensing position. We have a receptionist position. We have 2 positions in the outreach and education, and 1 that'll be split between exam and education.
It's not a bad thing to have an opening or 2 going into this. You never know when the government or the governor's office might issue some type of mandate requiring a 10% reduction in your budget across the board type thing. So as long as we've got a little bit of leeway in there with some open positions, it protects the integrity of the jobs of the employees we have. And we always want to be in that position. It's kind of a tight line to walk, because you don't want to have the ability for additional employees and go back to the legislature and ask for more and you hadn't filled the ones you've had. But you have to protect yourself in the event that some mandate comes out to cut your budget across the board. We don't want to get in a position that we ever have to let an employee go based upon a statewide reduction requirement. So even that we need the employees and we need more than what we're authorized, it's not a bad thing to have an opening or 2 still hanging out there to protect the employees that we have. So Lisa, you agree with that philosophy?
Absolutely. And we've always had to shuffle around, and we've always had to pay particular attention to that. And we actually did have cuts, 3 sessions ago, something like that. And it was severe. And I can tell you that what you end up doing is you end up losing your enforcement staff, and that's a difficult thing. But we were able to cover all of those cuts last time through retirement. So it just happened to work out. And you just have to look out for that and anticipate what could haves and ifs and move forward. And we also actually have another accountant position, which we'll eventually fill too, as we move some people around. And some of the people that you have right now will get moved, may get moved, and I'll give you, for instance, which allowed for them to be moved into a new position at a higher rate of pay, is taking someone from an existing position that has qualifications for an open position, which recently occurred and saved our lives with finance. So that the person had a banking background, we were able to shift them over and quickly learn how to use this new system the best that we could. So there's just all those little things that we have to watch out for and plan for.
Here, I don't see his face on here.
I don't see him appearing on my screen. Is Richard on the meeting?
He was earlier, I thought. Richard, can you hear us? Maybe not.
Okay, well, I guess that means we can talk about him if he's not here.
Sir, this is your meeting.
No.
Well, that concludes everything I wanted to, oh, sorry.
Any other questions for Kenneth? Or anything having to do with our financials? Everybody good? Okay. Thank you, Kenneth. Good job.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess that brings us to Lynn Latome. And Lynn, before you start, let me give everyone a little bit of background about what we're doing here. We are adopting some repeals that I think were proposed back in September, actually posted to the Texas Register in October, and received no comments. Basically, these are eliminating some rules having to do with continuing education. They're duplicative of some of the statutes, just basically a repeat of the statute. So today, we'll be asking the board to actually adopt these rules. They've been proposed, they've been posted in the Texas Register, they've gone through the Governor's Office of Compliance, and now they come back to us for adoption. And those, once we approve them today for adoption, they go into effect, or these rules are repealed. Is it 15 days from the time that they are submitted to the Secretary of State? Is that the effective date of them?
It's 20 days.
20 days. Okay. So at any rate, that's what we're doing. These are rules that back in September, some of you might not have been here back then, but the board proposed these to be repealed. They got posted in the Texas Register. They've gone through the Governor's Office of Compliance, and now this is a normal procedure. They come back to us for formal adoption. So Lynn, why don't you walk us through what those rules are? And we will handle these as one motion when she completes all of her presentation. We'll list them individually, but handle them as one motion at the end of her presentation. So,
Well, thank
it's all
you.
yours.
Thank you. For the record, Lynn Latome, General Counsel, and I think Frank just gave you your rules presentation. So thank you, sir. If you will look in your board materials, you'll see a document titled Board Meeting Document Summary. And this gives you an update for the considerations that were made by the board in September. Is precisely September 22nd, 2021, the board proposed the following rules for repeal at that time, and those were the rule provisions at 365.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.10, 0.13, 0.16, 0.17, and 0.18. At that time, the board considered that section 365.2 largely repeated the exemptions found in 1301.051 through 0.058 of the Occupations Code, commonly known as the Plumber's Licensing Law. The board considered that 365.4 largely restates sections 1301.352, 1301.359, and 1301.401 of the Texas Occupations Code. The board considered that 365.6 essentially repeats sections 1301.403 through 405 of the Texas Occupations Code. 365.10 A through C was already covered in 1301.451 of the Occupations Code, and 365D10 refers to the Enforcement Committee, which no longer exists as a result of House Bill 636 being passed by the 87th Legislature in its regular session. 365.13 A through E was rendered obsolete by Senate Bill 37 passed in the 86th legislative session in 2019, which amended the Texas Occupations Code 56003 to prohibit a licensing authority from taking disciplinary action against a person based on the person's student loan default. 365.13 F through G essentially restated the process described in the Family Code at section 232.0135 on the collection of child support payments in arrears. Ultimately, these rules made that redundant. 365.16, 17, and 18 were considered for repeal to implement the changes made by House Bill 636. As a result of 636, the board was granted explicit rulemaking authority to set the minimum curriculum standards for continuing education and training programs and qualifications for instructors. Notably, 636 did not give the board explicit rulemaking authority to regulate the publishers of material. House Bill 636 also moved the administrative approval process of course providers and instructors from the board to the executive director. As such, the rule provisions in 365.16 through 18 were rendered obsolete. These rule repeals were posted in the Texas Register for 30 days of public comment on October 15th, 2021. No comment was received. As such, as no comments were received, staff recommends approval and adoption of the repeals at 365.2, 4, 6, 10, 13, 16, 17, and 18. Again, the effective date will be 20 days after its posting in the Texas Register and the Texas Secretary of State.
I'm glad I studied this because that wouldn't make any sense at all to me. It's a complex thing, but Lynn did a good job of explaining to me in private. This basically is clearing the deck because there are some changes that were provided in 636 that are contrary to these. The reason we feel safe in going ahead and proposing and eventually adopting these rules, repealing all these rules, the language found in these rules, with just a small exception, are all found in our statute. So we as an agency are required to follow the statute as well as our own rules. So by eliminating these rules, we still have the same obligation because they're statutorily required anyway. So it's not short term, it's not a significant to the agency. Long term, and I think by our next meeting, we will have replacement rules to take the place of these that conform with House Bill 636. But in this interim 30 to 60 day period, we're still bound by statute and things still go along. Lynn correctly stated that we didn't have any public comment during the posting period, although some of you actually did comment. If you remember going back, we actually opened this up prior to formal proposal to gain input from the industry. And there were a handful, maybe 5 or 6 recommendations that were made prior to formal posting. I still have them and Lynn has them, so they'll be taken into consideration even that they weren't actually filed during the posting period. But I've got them, because I know several of you sent in some comments prior to our formal process. The other thing I want to ask the board, and this is not, we're going to have a motion here in a second for these adoptions, but you know, there are 2 schools of thought on these. I mentioned that these rules are also contained in statute. And there are 2 schools of thought. Do you take everything in the statute and make it a rule? Or do you only cover in your rules those things that are not covered in statute?
Does everybody understand what I'm saying on that? Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Under no circumstances should you repeat things if you can help them.
Okay, that's one school of thought. Anyone else? The only thing I would say is this, is every plumber or every provider doesn't necessarily have a legal team behind them to deal with this stuff. And as plain as simple as we can in the rules, I think we need to have included in our rules the things that plumbers and providers regularly and reoccurringly refer to. There are some things in the statute that really the general population probably don't have a lot of concern about. And those rules, there's no reason in the world to ever repeat them because it does nothing but clutter up your rules. As we go through our quadcentennial rule review, which we're talking a plain talk initiative, and we're going to start at the beginning and go to the end, I think what you'll find is a hybrid. Some of the statutory requirements that are found in the statute might be repeated in the rule, but only because it's something that the plumber or the provider would have to frequently refer to, and they wouldn't have to research our rules and also research the statute. So I think what we will see when we finish our quadcentennial rule review is a hybrid type, that we're not going to repeat them all. And I agree with Bill 100% that the more streamlined and less we can say, the better. But there are some things that we regularly need guidance on, and we use them day in and day out. Those are probably going to be, even if they're repeated, probably be improved. So that's just a general comment. So is there a motion to adopt the proposals as stated by Ms. Latone? Basically adopting the repeal of 365, 2, 4, 6, 10, 13, 16, and 17. Did I get them all?
And 18.
And
18. Okay. Is there a motion? Okay. Motion by Mr. Stout. Is there a second?
Darren Black, second.
Mr. Black seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. It also, as a part of that motion, I would ask that you authorize the board chair to sign these adoptions on behalf of the board. Is that okay with you, Bill?
Absolutely.
Would you have a motion and a second by to allow the board chairman to sign these adoptions? Okay.
Did we have a motion and a second?
Yes.
Motion.
Motion by Bill,
Oh,
second by Ron Ainsworth.
whatever, yeah. We'll share it.
Okay, anything else, Lynn?
Vote.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Lynn, anything else?
No?
Let me get back off mute. No, that considers all of your rule issues, and I'm happy to look forward and work with all of you as we consider new rule adventures in the future, in the very near future.
Steve, are you with us? I think we're ready to move to the enforcement report.
Yes, sir.
There you are, Steve. Floor is all yours. Go ahead.
Okay, what we have submitted for this board meeting would just be the board orders of administrative penalties along with the previous violations that were have been paid and are submitted for signature. I believe it requires only signature by the executive director. Let's see, I'm sorry, it is required by the chairman. So if there's any questions regarding the board order, the other thing that, of course, we've submitted are the only, it's just 2 cease and desist orders, and that should only be for the month of February because we'd already submitted those for the end of quarter at the January board meeting. And of course, we have those pending for the next board meeting. They'll come up to provide some additional information on performance measures and any additional cease and desist.
Board members, these board orders are found under your tab 7, and the cease and desist orders are found under tab 8 that have been previously given to you. Are there any questions concerning these board? And Steve,
Yes, sir.
I'm correct that under the board orders, these are penalties that have already been collected?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I will also point out, if you look at the board orders and that those that have already been issued and collected, there are 58 total. 23 of those relate to a subject we're about to talk about, and that's unlicensed activity. So basically 40% of the board orders that have been issued on this particular meeting, 40% of them, or 23, have to do with unlicensed activity. So for those who say that we don't do enough about unlicensed activity or unauthorized activity, I would refer you to these board orders. 40% of what we do is that. And also, we should take into consideration is we have a statutory obligation when a complaint is filed against a licensee. Steve is required to investigate it and take appropriate action. So these complaints that are not having to do with unlicensed or unauthorized activity, most of which I would assume, Steve, are as a result of complaints from consumers. Is that an
Yes,
accurate statement?
That is accurate. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I will say that the 2 cease and desist orders that we have in our packet today, both of those have to do with unlicensed activity. So I would tell you that I think our enforcement department, we've got 9 investigators now. We just added one, I think.
Yes, sir.
And that's a lot of territory. I very seldom say this, but I will say it now since we're going into the unlicensed activity discussion. I don't know how much more we can expect out of 9 investigators working in a state with 30 million people on unlicensed activity. Steve and Victor Sandoval attended the Tyler town hall meeting. And as we expected, one of the big areas had to do with unlicensed activity. And I made a statement, and I'll stand by it today. If we enlisted the help of the Department of Public Safety and had every officer working for us, I don't think we could cover all the unlicensed activity in the state of Texas. So to think that the problem of unlicensed activity is going to be solved with 9 investigators is an unrealistic expectation. We're going to, well, before I get into the unlicensed activity, let's deal with this. Is there a motion, or are there any questions having to do with the board orders or the cease and desist, having to do with the amounts of penalties or the nature of the complaints or anything? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt and accept the board orders as in our board book as approved and authorizing the chairman to sign the document for these?
Justin, I so move.
Justin moves. Second. Bill Clark seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The cease and desist orders are just for our information. I don't think there's any action necessary on our part.
Correct.
On the cease and desist. They're strictly for our information. Steve, anything else before we move into a discussion having to do with unlicensed activity?
No, sir, I don't believe so. Not unless you have any questions for me.
Board members, any questions of Steve before we talk about this? At our last board meeting, I believe Justin is the one that suggested that we put this on an agenda as a discussion item because, in fact, unlicensed activity is a huge issue for our agency and it's a huge issue for the industry across the state. But as I previously stated, I think it's unrealistic for us to expect this problem to be solved or even significantly addressed with 9 investigators operating in the state of Texas, we are going to have to think outside the box in our approach to unlicensed activity. And I'm open to ideas or suggestions from anyone on the board of what we can do. I don't think we're going to get a lot more out of our investigators than what we're getting right now. And I would suggest that we take a different approach through a series of public service announcements. Justin had recommended putting on our webpage a consumer document where a consumer, we are going to have to educate the consumers why it's important to hire a licensed plumber versus an unlicensed plumber. And we're going to have to effectively deliver that message to consumers. So it's open for discussion. If anyone's got any ideas, now would be the time to throw them out. Justin?
Well, I guess I'll go first since I kind of brought this up at the last meeting. I think you're right, Frank. You know, 9 investigators or 90 investigators, we probably wouldn't be able to do much more than make a dent in the problem. So I agree. I think we're going to need to do something that's a little more broad. You mentioned the 30 million people in Texas, and I think you know, the best thing we can do and the most efficient thing we can do is to enlist all of their help and to educate them that if they see somebody, you know, out there performing plumbing without a license, if, you know, somebody gives them a quote and they can't provide a license number, then, you know, we need to know about it, and they, you know, provide a way for them to turn that in and provide a education for them to know that they need to not use those folks, and that, you know, they need to, you know, check for a license before you know, ever let them set foot on your property and take a look at your plumbing. So I think this is a great way to start it. And I think that's you know, some public service ads and putting a spot on our website and, you know, really pushing the info out to the consumers is a really good way to go. You know, I think one other potential thing that we could investigate using is all of our licensed inspectors that are out there. I know there's been a little bit of hesitancy on behalf of some of the municipal inspectors to turn over that information when they catch somebody performing plumbing without a license. But I think maybe, and I know we've talked about having some town halls with the inspector community, and maybe that's something else that we need to focus on to try and you know, just build awareness and to sort of lower those barriers to where people feel comfortable in sharing information with the board.
Steve and I spoke briefly, and I've talked to Lynn about this a little bit, is I'm not sure what we can do to get assistance from the cities and municipalities across the state in trying to stamp out unlicensed activity. We can ask for voluntary compliance and help, but I think we also need to look at statutorily, do we have any authority to require a city to enforce the plumbing license laws in their municipality? And I think the answer I got from Steve and from Lynn, it would appear the only authority we have is that we have over inspectors, and inspectors are required to comply with the plumbing licensing law, and failure to identify and try to help eliminate unlicensed activity would be a violation on the inspector's part. Is that true, Steve or Lynn? Do y'all want to weigh in on that?
Plumbing inspectors are required to maintain their code of conduct, and that potentially that's a violation of the code of conduct.
We also talked about, and I think that we will do this, we're going to put together through Lynn and through Steve and through comments from the board, a multi-point plan of how to address this unlicensed activity. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this when I'm long gone, but we have to do what we can while we're here to try to address it. And one of the things I want us to do is to contact, and Steve has already contacted, the Texas Municipal League. And Steve, explain to me the email that you sent and the response you got back as to what they're going to allow us to do in this regard.
Yeah, I noticed on their website, they had actually like a magazine that goes out almost every month, but according to their email, they have like weekly legislative updates, and this is not something uncommon that they do relay regulatory information out to different municipalities that they're involved with. So I think a good source, and it sounds like it's something that we could, hit them with, multiple times, not just a one-time. Here's our information. That's all there is to it. I think it's something we could really address, maybe several times a year. And again, that's just one source.
Hey, Steve, Dave here. Do you find the unlicensed activity happening in a certain sector? Like, is it in residential rework, something? Is it in new construction? Where could we focus our attention?
Well, you're going to find, unfortunately, a lot of the unlicensed activity is in new residential, and they actually have a responsible master plumber. So, that does, focus a lot of our attention when we find that. Even with, of course, with plumbing inspectors, we get a lot of complaints that are filed by plumbing inspectors, and it has to do with those that they have witnessed on job sites engaging in plumbing. Find out, they go to check their license or registration to find out they're either not licensed or they're not licensed and not registered, or expired registrations, or they are registered but there is no direct supervision. That's a big chunk of it. I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but I would say it would be a high number. Most of the other unlicensed activity that we do get that are handyman, so to speak, would be through the consumers providing us a formal complaint and providing us with invoices and cancel checks, things like that. And that's where we get most of those. Those are hard to find on a job site. Most times their vehicles aren't marked. They were actually invited to the job site by the homeowner. For the most part, they wanted them there. So, for us to just be able to go up and find someone that's unlicensed, maybe doing a repair in a residential setting, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I was sitting behind a van at a red light not too long ago, and it was like XYZ home repair. And on the back of this in vinyl lettering, it had every kind of home repair you can imagine: electrical, plumbing, HVAC, fences, concrete, everything. And I'm going, I wonder how many licenses he has.
I like that.
Oh, you saw him too. Similar to that. Yeah.
We get these. I get them daily. We have a lot of really help out there from our licensees, master plumbers, journeyman plumbers. They're taking pictures of these vehicles. They send them to us. As soon as we get them, I'll forward them out to the area field investigator. We'll do research on them. Mr. Dent was talking about Victor Sandoval. He went out yesterday to double check an address where I sent him. We had a potential address, but he went out and actually found the vehicle that we were looking for at the address and verified. So we do have a good contact information. So it takes time. It's not just, receive it, send them a penalty. We have to do our due diligence. We have to cross our T's, dot our I's, so to speak, and we have to make sure that we have made contact. We have provided them with an opportunity to respond, and then go from there.
All that's good information and it's accurate, but we're going to have to think larger, and we're going to have to think bolder than just thinking about our enforcement people doing their job, because I think they're doing their job. I would love to see, and we've got APHCC is here, labor unions are involved.
we need support from the entire industry to try to help stamp out unlicensed activity. And one thing that the plumbers and the plumbing companies could do would be a huge help is in every piece of advertising they do, brag on the fact that they are a license for the state of Texas. Because you have to have a distinction between these outlaws and between reputable plumbing companies. And if you look at how effective this 71K group was in rallying behind a cause, if they want to look for something to rally behind, how about let's rally behind stamping out unlicensed activity? And one of the ways of doing that is every time that you have a print ad or a TV ad or a radio ad, all plumbing companies should be touting the fact that they are licensed by the state of Texas. And that creates a distinction between Frank's Friendly Plumbing and a plumbing company that's actually got a license. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach. We're going to have to create an awareness among consumers that just because someone advertises they do plumbing doesn't make them a plumber. And in order to do that, we're going to have our plumbers and our licensing base bragging about the fact that they hold a license. And that will set them apart from everyone else that's not doing that. And you know, maybe APHCC can start some type of initiative among their membership. I think we need to talk to our union representatives who reach a lot of different plumbers and not just get ideas from them, but also to encourage their companies when they don't ever advertise anything that they don't brag on the fact that they're licensed with the state of Texas. And then it's up to us to say, why is it advantageous for the consumer to use a licensed plumber versus an unlicensed plumber? And one reason we talked about this morning, and that's the fact that they're vetted for criminal history background. If someone holds a license, you're inviting them into your home. And you can rest assured that once we get through our cycle and we've got everyone through a criminal background check, that you're not inviting some criminal into your home. So that's a number one big issue if I were a consumer that I'd like to know before I invited someone there. So, okay, Ron?
I think it's very noble to maybe try to work with the municipal league or cities, but I think we have to be realistic. Inspection departments in most cities are understaffed. They have budget issues, trying to hire people. You know, it's a tough market. So I think any effort that we make to ask municipalities to enforce the plumbing law is, in my opinion, futile. I think PSA, education, and like you said, make the public aware as we can the importance of licensing. Thirdly, you're going to have a certain amount of handyman, and you know, as much as we try and the staff tries, there are people that are looking to save a buck. And this guy will be half the price of a licensed plumber, and they're going to try him, and they're not going to have any issue with him till it doesn't work right. Then they're calling Steve. So, you know, it's going to be there. And I'm just trying to look at it realistically. We're not going to eliminate handyman doing plumbing work. We need to control it. And the beautiful thing is the cell phone. Snap that picture, send it to Steve of that truck and the license plate. And I think that's the best thing we can do. But I think we have to be realistic in how we approach this. I'm not against looking at new ways to do it, but I think using the municipalities is a dead end.
Well,
I don't disagree with you, Ron. The only thing I would say is that there's no one silver bullet that's going to solve the problem. And I think we have to have a multiple pronged approach. And one of those approaches is going to be asking for cooperation out of municipal league and their cities and their jurisdictions. Granted, everything you said is absolutely correct. But if we get one city or 10 cities that at least do something will be better than doing nothing today. So I would say this, one of those approaches we'll do is let Steve follow up with the Texas Municipal League, and maybe on a weekly basis, put something out to their members to do that. I'd like to solicit ideas from PHCC, from labor unions, from the industry itself of what else we can do, as long as it's not everything going back to Steve. And a lot's going to go to him. I mean, I'm not trying to cover for him, but he's doing a lot right now. And with 9 people, I think he's doing about as much as he can do. So to solicit a bunch more complaints is not really going to solve the problem. I think we're going to have to, our approach is going to have to be education of the consumer. And I talked to Kevin about it briefly yesterday, and Lisa and Steve. And I think if the staff would do this at our next board meeting, if we would put together a 5 or 10 point program of what we're going to do based upon what you've heard the board talk about and what you've heard Steve talk about, let's make that presentation at our next board meeting. And I just don't think there's going to be a silver bullet to it. It's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach. And even at best, it's not going to solve it. I'd love to say that we can, but I just don't believe that we're going to be able to solve it by that. Yes, sir, Bill?
I think that would.
Mr. Clock is on mute.
Okay, how about now?
I can't believe you have a problem.
Yeah, it's just, so I think I'd like to look at the bigger hammer approach. As I was looking through, the fines that are administered, it is not very significant. At the last meeting, I said that I would go look and see what the professional engineers board is doing. If you put PE at the end of your name and you are not a licensed engineer, it will cost you $2,500. If the PE board fines you, and I think we just need to be a little bit more severe, so that would discourage some people. And at least it would discourage them after they paid the fine the first time.
We've said this before, Steve, and I think you're hearing it again, is the board is very supportive of you ratcheting up to the maximum capacity that you have on any unlicensed activity. I think you'll get support from the board on that. But I'll say this again, and I said it a few board meetings ago, and I don't know if we ever did it. It affects that one person that we fined $2,000, but we need to publicize when we nail somebody. We need to hang a hide on the fence of that coyote we caught as a warning to the rest of them. So somehow or another, Kevin and Lisa, we're going to have to come up with some way to distribute these penalties and that heavy hammer approach to everyone else in the industry, so that word will get out, and maybe that would be somewhat of a deterrent to others. So, anything else on the subject?
I just go back to the PR aspect of it. It sounds like that's really at the bottom line of everything that we've discussed here. And Kevin, Lisa, I'm happy to help out any way I can if you need some help. My academic background is actually in communications, so I'm happy to make suggestions or help out with that. But I think it's going to be a PR offensive is really what we've got to do here to one, publicize the penalties for doing it wrong, and then two, get out to the consumers and tell them why they need to find somebody who's doing it right. And as I said earlier, I mean, it can literally be a matter of life or death. And so, I think we just need to be sure that the consumers are aware.
Okay. I look forward to your presentation at our next board meeting.
All kidding aside, I'm really serious
Yeah,
about that.
I'm happy to come
You
into town
volunteered
and,
to work
you know,
with the staff,
work with y'all
so
sometime. And
got to come up with a 5 or 10 point plan of something we're going to actually do, and we'll talk about it at the next board meeting, and let's actually put it in place. Any other comments or? Okay. If we could, let's take a 5-minute break before we go into public comment. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. We'll be recessed here for 5 minutes. It's 1:37. We'll come back here at, let's say, at 1:45.
I'm gonna.
I believe that we have covered everything on our agenda today, and we're down to the public comment section. I don't think that's me. Who, mine? What are y'all laughing about? Like I said, we have covered everything on our agenda. It's time for our public comment. Dawn, do we have anyone that has a public comment to make, either online or in person?
No, sir.
I find that hard to believe. Well, I might have to call some of you to the podium. I might have some questions for you then. Not really, but nobody online has indicated anything. So, well, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's the way it is. So. All right. If there are no public comment, discussion about our next board meeting, and Lisa and I had tentatively talked about the middle to the latter part of May as our next board meeting. Does that kind of jive with everyone?
I'm going to be out of the country from the 12th to the 18th of May, just a heads up.
Okay.
Sure, you just got to get some Marriott points and airline miles.
12th to the
18th.
12th to the 18th. Okay, we'll take that in consideration. Anyone else have any business before the board today, or that they'd like to discuss as far as future agenda items? I think by the end of May, we'll get an initial report from Lisa about how our turning on our computer-based testing went. I'm hoping it'll go well. So we'll get a report on that. If we can schedule where Justin can be here, we'll either get a report from him, or if we happen to have it during that other period, either Lisa or someone else in the staff can make that report for you.
What day is Lisa's birthday?
17th of May.
I'm marking it on my calendar.
Okay.
Frank, I'd like to ask Lisa, y'all, if we could do this on the next board agenda, or just put the information out. The new dates on renewing your licenses, renewing your endorsements. Obviously, we're not collecting for the endorsements any longer. Where is that found at as far as your renewal dates now and your endorsement renewals? As far as we had one of our guys actually bring that up to me this week, and I really didn't have a pat answer for him.
The rule that dealt with it is actually part of one that we're repealing, and then it'll be further explained in a new rule. And in addition, though, if they're trying to determine how to renew their endorsement, the only thing that they have to meet on the renewal of, for example, that requires CE is the med gas renewal. And if you look at your training history, you'll see that you had MedGas CE 2 years ago or whatever, and you know you're coming into that third year, then you're going to need your CE within that third year. And we run reports to determine who's in default and who's not. And if you're in default on continuing ed that goes with that MedGas renewal, we're going to send you out something. Otherwise, it's going to keep going with your license. So when your license renews, if you have a WSPS, it's going to renew. It doesn't have CE with it. If you have fire sprinkler, there's no CE with it. The one that catches and causes the problem is the med gas. But everyone needs to remember that's a 3-year CE cycle.
Right.
So the best thing to do if you have a med gas is to look on the website if you don't remember when you took your CE.
And are
But
we
the
looking?
fee is gone.
Are we looking at making more of a push towards renewing licenses for everybody at particular times as opposed to where we've been for years?
It's actually staggered right now.
Right, it is.
Yeah, everything's staggered. It's been staggered for many, many years. What was not staggered was, it wasn't staggered in relation to the renewal of the license, was the endorsement. And that's what we changed.
Okay.
And the inspectors were not staggered in relation to the other licenses that they held. So
that'll help a lot.
Yeah.
And I think disseminating that information through a PSA or through some form on the website, it's just kind of vague to everybody looking at it, trying to understand it.
And I think what went out was, the big thing that went out was the inspector, that the endorsements were going to change and the time period for the inspectors, because that was a big deal financially. The renewal of the endorsements, some people actually did call and say, I think I owe some more money, but my license renewed. And I was like, man, that guy is one honest plumber. And so there was another one that went out that just went, this fee is going away. But it was a gradual changeover as we were also making other license fee changes. And so it was hard to announce because not everyone lost the fee at the same time. So, but now they're gone.
The other thing to be on our future
board agenda is Kenneth, help me on the dates. I believe that our strategic plan is due in June. June 1st. Our initial, I forget the term you use, but our legislative appropriations request is in June also. Is that right?
Legislative appropriations request will be due sometime first 2 to 3 weeks of August, somewhere at the beginning of mid-August.
So at our next board meeting, you should expect some discussion on our strategic plan, maybe a rough draft of what we got for your comments. Also, an initial discussion on our legislative appropriations request. Believe it or not, we're going to have to already start ramping up our future requests. It's coming up in January. It seems like it just was the other day that we just finished this one, but
and then sometime in July, we'll know what our base number is for prepping our legislative appropriations. So we know what we're getting base and we can plan our exceptional items within our base or decide where we're going to ask for additional money.
We'll be asking for additional money. One thing that the staff and I have discussed is we have our job as a board. We have got to anticipate this high school program and trade school program 2 and 3 years down the road are going to start bringing in in addition to what we already get, the 3,000 or 4,000 new licensees. We're going to be adding another 1,000, and we've got another testing center, and we've got a mobile unit that we're going to have to man, and we've got a Harlingen testing facility that's coming up. So we're going to have to anticipate all of those things that our legislative appropriations request this time. So there will be quite a bit of financial discussion and priorities at our next board meeting in that regard. So, anyone else? Any other business from the staff? Lisa or Kenneth or Lynn or Kevin? Give you public one last chance. All right. With that being said, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.